This is Metro Week. Our top story, national attention comes to Tucson's job training programs for veterans. We'll recap federal officials' visit here this week. And we'll ask one veteran how job training helped bring her out of homelessness.
Everyone thinks that when you see someone and they're on the street and they want a handout. Some people just need a hand up.
Plus, our Journalists Roundtable analyzes the week's news.
Welcome to Metro Week. I'm Andrea Kelly. Tucson is one of nearly 24 cities with a goal of eradicating homelessness among military veterans. This week, 3 of President Barack Obama's cabinet secretaries came to Tucson to get an update on the city's progress. Arizona Public Media reporter Amanda LeClaire has our story.
At the Sullivan-Jackson Employment Center, Secretary of Housing and Urban Development Julian Castro praised the work being done in the city to help homeless veterans.
By adopting policies like Housing First, by championing the kind of collaboration that this Sullivan-Jackson Employment Center is right at the heart of, they are making the end of veteran homelessness something that is within reach.
The center serves Pima County residents who are looking for a way out of homelessness.
We work with 10 other community organizations in providing employment assistance, job training, and transitional housing to move people into a purposeful life. One of the populations that we are really proud to serve are veterans who need assistance in housing and employment in order to become self-sufficient again in their life. They have served our country. We need to serve them.
The people who seek help at the Sullivan-Jackson Center come from many backgrounds.
Well, good morning. May I please have the name of the person who does the hiring and whether
According to Nelson, those who served in the military have a certain advantage over civilians that often helps them find employment and housing.
Sure.
I can tell you that veterans bring a lot more ability to adapt to a structured lifestyle and looking for work and doing the steps they need in order to get back into a self-sufficient lifestyle, a purposeful life.
The center is one of a handful in the U.S. that serves as a one-stop shop for access to housing and employment services. That's one of the reasons Tucson is making progress in helping military veterans get off the streets and back into society. The other reason is the Sullivan-Jackson Center's staff.
It's all right here. I've been doing this for 25 years. One of my colleagues, Cheryl Bakari, who's the head instructor here, has been here longer than I have. We have a wealth of experience. And experience counts when you're dealing with people that have the barriers to employment that everyone coming here has. That's what makes Tucson and Pima County different.
The programs at the Job Training Center on Tucson's Southside are for veterans, people who are homeless, and anyone who needs the extra training or help looking for a job. This week, Jaquay Moore met with the secretaries who were in town. Then she shared her story with us. Would you tell us your story of what happened that led you to the Sullivan-Jackson Employment Center? What was going on in your life at that point?
I migrated here from New Mexico to Arizona, and I was going through a relationship that was not very healthy. Things panned out that they didn't work out for us, and so I was kind of stuck with nowhere to go. I didn't know anyone in this state. I didn't have a job at that point. I had my vehicle and all my belongings packed in my car. So I made 4 attempts to get here. I finally made the phone call, and I was told, just get here. So I borrowed $40 from someone that I knew in the town, and I came to Tucson. I showed up at the door at Sullivan-Jackson. I went through my in-processing, and a lot's happened since then.
So walk us through the actual training process and where you were living at the time when you were getting training through that Sullivan-Jackson Employment Center.
I started off in a hotel the very first night I came, and then you have to go through a process of being able to stay at the shelter. So I started the medical process of being cleared to stay at the shelter. I stayed at the Salvation Army for a week, and then from there I went to Coming Home, which is a transitional housing program for veterans, and I was transitioned over there. I was doing the Sullivan-Jackson program at the same time, working on a job search and wanting really bad to go back to school.
So let's start with what did you do first? Did you go back to school or did you get a job?
I did both at the same time.
Okay.
Yeah, I was blessed enough that when I went to the college, to Pima Community College, I was interested in the work study program, the federal work study program. I'm not a veteran who received benefits, so I had to go through, Sullivan Jackson agreed to pay for my education. So under the grant program that they have there, I went to the school and I applied for a federal work study position. I was really blessed to have been able to have gotten that position right away. And so I started school in July. Well, I started school in June, the summer, and then by August I was working for the college as a federal work study student.
What kind of work were you doing?
I was actually working in the counselor's office, which was really great for me because as students would come in and kind of be lost and not knowing what to do, I was able to guide them and make appointments for them. It just kind of got me back into the customer service area of things.
And you've finished a degree?
I'm not finished yet. I had a couple of medical issues that popped up along the way, and so I'm still working on my degree. I'm a work in progress. I've been that all my life, but I'm working on my degree. I have 45 credits down, a couple semesters left to go. I've had some, like I said, some medical issues which prevented me from completing at this point. Going back in the fall, I hope.
And you're also still working at Pima Community College?
I am, actually. I worked as a federal work study for about 4 months, and my boss said she saw potential in me to move forward, which I was really grateful for. I became a temporary employee at Pima back in 2011, and I've been a temporary employee ever since. I've just recently applied for a permanent position with Pima in the Veterans Department. I went through a transition there with working in the College Readiness Program, which helps students of all ages who are transitioning back into school and maybe having a little trouble getting into the college due to the fact that they've forgotten or unable to meet the criteria that they want to meet to place in the placement test. And so we worked with them and got them additional training to get them to the place where they could take college courses. So that was really great for me. It gave me a chance to give back. I met a lot of veterans in the interim of that, and I worked with a lot of people my own age. It was difficult trying to go back to school at age 48. I felt like I'd kind of hit rock bottom. No, I didn't feel like I hit rock bottom. And I had to come back from that. There was a lot of guilt, a lot of regret for some of the choices I had made. And so working with other people who were also going through that was very rewarding for me.
What did you get out of the job training or the job preparation? You said you worked on kind of getting ready for the job market. What was useful in that experience?
They take you back to the basics. Anyone who's been to Sullivan Jackson Employment Center knows they start you from the beginning. It's like you just walk in or you just got out of high school and you're about to go for your first position. They do interview processing. They tape them so you can see how to interview. They also walk you through a strenuous program of getting your application together. They show you how to write an application, a perfect application. If you don't get a job when you leave Sullivan Jackson, it's an amazing program.
And of course, all of this is part of the bigger picture of Tucson and the country's goals to end veterans' homelessness by the end of the year. We did an update a few weeks ago and learned that there's still a few hundred veterans, homeless veterans who need housing, yes, and then of course other services. What do you think about that goal and your experience going through some of these programs to help you?
I have to tell you, without these programs in place, a lot of individuals wouldn't be able to sustain. They wouldn't get their self-esteem back. They wouldn't get their drive back. It's devastating to end up homeless at later on in life. You think you have all your bases covered. You look up and you look around the country. There's over 4,400 female veterans who are homeless right now, and that's devastating. Women with children are on the streets. It's an epidemic in our country, and I'm grateful that the president and his cabinet are working to end this and give veterans their due, deserve for what they've given to the country. I know I had someone ask me recently, if you had to go back into the military today, if they called you, would you go? I said, absolutely, and I'm 53 years old, so trying to go back in, I don't know about a PT test, but everything else, I think I would definitely put my life back on the line for this country. And I think it's important that this country also assists those people who may have fallen from what we call grace. But it doesn't make them bad people. It just means there were some tough decisions they had to make.
Did you have a chance to speak with any of the secretaries who were here this week in town?
Absolutely. I spoke to all three of them. I was honored to sit at the round table with them and speak to them and talk about the changes and some of the things that we need to do. I'm really happy to hear about some of the female veterans programs that are out now. There's Blue Butterfly Village in California that they've rolled out. I would love to see something like that in Tucson.
What is that? Is it a housing?
It's a housing. What they've done is taken old barracks and they've refurbished them to make them like condo apartments for women with children, veterans with children. And it's devastating for a woman to have children and not be able to have housing where she feels safe, where her children can be with her. To give up your children and have to try to look for work, be on the street, not have a place to change clothes. How do you go for a job interview when you have nothing to base yourself on? So I think it's awesome that they're doing that. I also think that we need more of that in all of the cities. This is an epidemic across the country. So I think that we all, as a community, need to get involved, and we need to help our neighbors, help those people who weren't afraid to go die for this country too. Their families also go to war, and I think that's something that people forget.
How do you feel like they responded when you made those comments?
I think they were very positive about it. The good thing about it is it was an open discussion. It wasn't structured. They allowed us to say what was on our minds. And sometimes that's not so good, and sometimes that can be very healing for someone, to be able to just say it without having to try to structure it or make it sound good. The point is there's an epidemic, there's a problem, and people need help. And as I told them, it's not about a handout. Everyone thinks that when you see someone and they're on the street and they want a handout. Some people just need a hand up. They've fallen, they need a hand up to get back on their feet. I'm a prime example of that. I was very desolate at 48 and a minority, homeless veteran. I had a couple strikes against me that, were devastating for me, and I just didn't think there was a way out. That causes a lot of depression. PTSD isn't just in wartime. It comes from a lot of different things, upbringing and things of that nature. So, you never know a person's story. That's why I tell people, they'll sit next to me and go, God, I can't believe some of the things you've been through. Because we don't wear it on our sleeve or it's not written on our face, it doesn't mean that we haven't endured it. So I would just hope that people would be more understanding, more tolerant of the fact that you don't know another person's story.
Well, thank you for sharing yours, and good luck on your job search.
Thank you.
Your application.
Thank you.
Private companies and public medical schools are getting together. This year saw the banner University of Arizona union, and now the ties between Arizona State University and the Mayo Clinic are getting tighter. The changing face of medicine in Arizona.
It's a fantastic relationship where we've taken a comprehensive research university and connected it with the national leading clinic, and we found a way to take all the things that we do and all the things that they do and leverage. It's not 2 + 2 = 4, it's 2 + 2 = 7.
Now our Journalist Roundtable. Joining me in the studio this week is my colleague at Arizona Public Media, Amanda LeClaire, Mari Herreras of the Tucson Weekly, and David Wickner of the Arizona Daily Star. Thanks to you all for coming in. Amanda, we're going to stay on the topic of this Sullivan-Jackson Employment Center. You gave us an introduction at the start of the show to the Secretary's visit, but I wanted to know what else they said while you were there about the role of this center in the overall goal.
When they were there, they had a roundtable with some of the vets and some of the staff at the Sullivan-Jackson Employment Center, and one of the things that Secretary of Labor Thomas Perez said that he feels it's really important for federal officials like him who are at that top level to come to cities like Tucson and speak to veterans and get these individual stories, which was what mainly happened, were veterans sharing their experiences before the Sullivan-Jackson Center and then how they found employment with the three cabinet secretaries. And he said he feels the perspective and remembering that federal policies actually affect individual lives, and that was why they were making this tour.
That's nice to hear, right? That there's some real people behind some of the policy that's being implemented. Now, did they talk at all about how much the focus on ending veterans homeless versus ending homelessness overall, how that dichotomy works, or which one is the more important focus?
Well, the focus is on military veteran homelessness right now because in 2010, President Obama started this initiative called Opening Doors. And that had the goal of ending all military veteran homelessness by 2015. That's not realistically going to happen this year, but they still have that goal in mind. And since the program began, they've been able to end veteran homelessness 33% or decrease it by 33% nationally.
Why did they come to Tucson?
They came to Tucson because it's a military town. You know, we have the Davis-Monthan Air Force Base. It's a place where a lot of military families are, and I think because of that, there's that communication network within the military that people can say, oh, there's this center here that's, you know, really having great progress. If they know somebody in the military who has ended up becoming homeless after their service, say, come to Tucson and you can get help here.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. For military communities, you see people stay after they retire to be near services, or VA, or what have you as well. So it makes a lot of sense that they would focus on that. It makes a lot of sense we have that kind of help here too, because we do need it.
No, this was also part of a larger tour. They're visiting other states or other cities. Do you know where else they're going, the secretaries?
Well, they're done with their tour now. They had gone to Houston on Monday, came to Tucson in the afternoon, and then headed to Las Vegas. But yeah, they focused really on the Southwest area this time around.
Did they talk about chronically homeless within the veteran population, those that are the most difficult? I mean, those who may not ever enter the doors of the employment center. Did they address that at all?
A little bit. Some of the things they addressed were that homelessness does seem to affect the veteran population more than other singular populations, and that's because they have a lot more risk. There's PTSD, there's combat syndrome, there's a lot of drug and alcohol abuse. So they did address that the idea that a place that, like the Sullivan Jackson Center, it doesn't just help people find employment. It helps them find housing. It helps them learn how to cope with mental illness, learns how to end substance abuse. They have all of these initiatives and other nonprofits that are involved, and I think that's really was the point of this Opening Doors initiative that was started, was to bring all that together.
Wraparound services that we really need more of in Tucson and other areas, not just homeless populations. It would be great to see.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds more dynamic than just kind of the one stop, one purpose, but instead it's a one-stop shop with more services.
Exactly, and in Tucson, actually there's only about a dozen cities in the nation, I think, that have a place like the Sullivan Jackson Employment Center, so it does make Tucson unique.
As we heard in your package, Tucson is unique for a few reasons, including also the experience at the center, the job experience of the staff at the center.
Absolutely, there's some really dedicated people there who have spent dozens of years in this field.
So I know the county also has the Keno Veterans Workforce Center, which they started a few years ago here. I don't know if that's connected or how that's connected, or if it was mentioned, but I know the county is proud of that. I was just talking to them about their veteran programs the other day. So
the Sullivan Jackson Employment Center is a component of the overall Pima County employment goals. It's a Pima County entity. Yeah. So Dave, speaking about veterans, you have just completed a big series in the Arizona Daily Star about essentially the future of Davis-Monthan Air Force Base. We've talked about why some of the veterans are here after their service. But what did you find? I mean, that's a huge topic, the future of DM. Can you boil down like a conclusion that you came to?
I think some of our findings, the main thing is obviously military communities are now on watch for what's happening with budget cuts and a possible base closing round, which hasn't been authorized by Congress, but it's going to come eventually. And Ashton Carter, I think just yesterday, said they're going to continue to press for a round of base closings. And I think some of the other findings are just that communities really need to get their acts together if they want to press their case to keep a base or add things. Davis-Monthan has done well in the past. We've added some missions here over the years. I think following the last BRAC round, we added the search and rescue component. That might have been just ahead of that, but it was around the same time. And then we got some drone unit that operates out of the 162nd Air National Guard that's actually based at DM. But they're talking about some pretty deep cuts in base closures. The last base closing round was more of a trimming and realignment and it didn't save a lot of money, frankly, which is why one of the reasons why some congressmen are against it. But this time they're going to have to dig a little deeper. And Davis-Monthan is I'd say the major base by any measure, along with some of the other huge test bases. And it has some great assets to it. And there are efforts now ongoing, and you have to kind of pick when things are going to ramp up in terms of these cuts before you start spending a lot of money. But you'll see communities across the country, including Tucson, now starting to hire consultants and try to focus their strategy. And a lot of that strategy would surround trying to sort of sell the military on a mission, new missions or additional missions or expanding existing missions to preserve the base. But our major mission, the A-10s, now are in jeopardy because they proposed retiring them here for the last couple of years, and before that they had cut quite a bit. But we are the biggest A-10 Thunderbolt II close air support plane base in the country.
What did you find in your reporting about the potential future for Davis-Monthan if those A-10s are discontinued here?
Well, there's still a lot of other operations here. The danger and the fear is that once you start taking away major flying missions, you sort of hollow the base out, and then you become more vulnerable to when a base closing round does come up. The A-10 is going to hang around for a little while. It was supposed to fly till 2028. They've been greatly upgraded, but with the budget constraints, the Air Force really wants to get rid of it. A big vertical cut of an entire fleet is saves a lot more money than little cuts. So, the question is what would replace that? Right now, the only plan that Air Force has is to base one squadron. We have 3 squadrons of A-10s here, comprising more than 80 planes, a couple thousand pilots and maintenance and support people. Their only plan right now is to bring one squadron F-16, the reserve squadron at that, in by fiscal 19, I think. Excuse me. So the question is then what would happen? You have that excess capacity, and the Air Force and all the services are really looking at a lot of excess base capacity. The Air Force has talked in the past, the last time it was measured was 24%, and then here recently in March, one of the generals said it's probably closer to 30% over capacity. So
You're
when
saying there's that many more bases or more people
base
employed at
capacity for the fleets they have. Yeah, they've cut their fleets back so much. So you have that danger where if you get rid of a major flying mission, why do you keep bases open flying missions? But we still have, and there's been no proposed cuts to combat search and rescue, which comprises quite a few people. They are looking to cut the electronic combat fleet in half, and that would be 7 out of 15 planes or so. So that would be a mission that's be affected. There's a lot of other units over there, including the 12th Air Force headquarters, and there's a Air and Space Center there. Plus you have the AMARG, the 309th Aircraft Maintenance and Regeneration Center.
Which we know more as the Boneyard.
The Boneyard, yes, which will continue on and might have a bigger role going forward. Who knows? They're still mothballing a lot of planes, so.
It seems like no matter what they do, they're just putting off the inevitable, that the A-10 will go away at some point. When you talk to Tucson leaders, do they address that? Do they?
They do, and the city came out with a report here recently by Dr. Barry Bleckman, who had worked with the city a while back, and came up with a long-term strategy for the community. And as part of that, talked about the A-10 is definitely going away sooner than we thought, but let's try to hold on to it as long as they can. So I think that's the spirit, is that we don't want to rush off and say, while we still have support in Congress to keep the A-10, let's back that. Let's talk about the assets we have. It's a wonderful area to train year-round, flying weather, the Goldwater Ranges, which are massive through southern Arizona. And so they're realistic, I would say, but the question is what comes next, and that gets very sticky because then you have planes like the F-35 that has not been based here, but might fly here at least for training at some point. It's a big, noisy bird, and there's a lot of people upset about that. And frankly, there's some people who don't like the F-16s, which are much louder than the A-10s. And they do fly here quite frequently, but there's not a huge base for them here. So it's anyone's guess as to how that will end up, but there's a couple different things that could happen.
Oh, you touch on the F-35 or Tucson Forward, which is the group that has been the most vocal about the noise situation, and you talk about other communities that have had similar fights, regarding that. Do you think that Tucson Forward has a chance in this fight if that happens? If we see the F-35?
Well, I think on the one hand, I think the Air Force is well aware that DM as a pretty urban base, and there's maybe a limit to what they can do. On the other hand, they haven't backed down in other places. The city of Valparaiso in Florida filed a lawsuit against them for the F-35s that were coming out of Eglin Air Force Base, and they ended up settling it with some additional mitigation measures. And then there's a proposal to base quite a few F-35s at the Burlington, Vermont Air Guard Base, and the town or residents there have sued the Air Force, and they haven't backed down. Certainly, they're willing to settle, and they're willing to do a lot of mitigation steps. But there's not a situation quite like Tucson out there, so it's very worrisome to some people that are sensitive to noise. Not everybody is, but even people who aren't in the direct flight paths really feel that with an escalation of noise, and the F-35s is some twice as loud as the F-16 even, and many times, several times louder than the A-10, that they would be a problem with, affect their quality of life, their home values, their health. And right now there's nothing on the table to bring that here. If there were a proposal to bring a significant number of new jets, different jets, like a big contingent of F-16s or the F-35, there would have to be an environmental impact analysis of that under the NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act. So they fought that a little bit recently. Tucson Ford was opposing the expansion of Operation Snowbird. The Air Force just finalized their finding of no significant impact, which allows them to proceed with the alternatives they prefer. But even then, their own report says that just expanding with some other louder planes here, just visiting, and they average the noise like the F-22 and the Aviate Harrier, louder, much louder than some of the planes that fly here now, that that would essentially create the need for a whole new round of examination. That's when Tucson Ford could step up again. When I talked to them last, they were assessing their options as far as the recent Snowbird EA that came out to expand those operations. They weren't very happy with it. It was redrafted. It went back and forth, as you might recall. And finally, there was this finding, and they're not very happy about it. Last I talked to them, they were looking at their options, basically, which I think the next step would have to be legal action, because there's not much left in the process. So.
There's a lot more here, but we're going to have to move on.
Sure, sorry.
Sorry about that. But Mari, I did want to get to another story that the Weekly was covering this week, which is a lawsuit that was filed this week by several healthcare providers to challenge a state abortion law. Tell us what happened tell us first about what the law is, and then we'll talk about the lawsuit.
Basically, the law requires abortion providers doctors to tell their patients that let's say you decide to take the medication abortion, which is a 2-pill process, that if you take the first pill, not to worry. There's this great way to reverse the abortion that supposedly has started, and it's with a series of progesterone shots. And now they're requiring doctors to tell people this exists. So the people who filed the lawsuit and are being represented by the ACLU are saying, wait a second, this is quackery. This isn't real science. And because the facts is that you have a 2-pill process that in order for it to complete the abortion, you have to take both pills. You can't just take one pill and then think that progesterone shots are good. It wouldn't matter. You would probably just monitor your pregnancy as you would any pregnancy if you decide to not take the second pill. And it's the folks on that side who filed the lawsuit, from their perspective, this is just another series of anti-abortion laws that the state has been filing that seem to go to litigation and then get stalled in court or reversed. And that's the hope here for those folks who filed it is that will likely happen as well.
And the heart of this is then who's dictating sort of the medical information that's going to patients?
Well, medical information and just healthcare overall. I mean, this is a legal right, and so they bring these laws, and folks like the ACLU and healthcare providers like Planned Parenthood will continue to fight them.
That is definitely not a light topic, neither is the future of DM or homelessness. But I do want to touch on something that's lighter, which is the Best of Tucson voting that the Tucson
That's
Weekly
right,
does every year.
right.
So that's out now, and you considered changing your process, but you're keeping it the same?
You know, we had a little discussion within the office. It wasn't that huge, but what's nice about having new staff and new voices at the Weekly is that it brings up reconsiderations, which was, should we kind of take away the reader perspective a bit and focus on our perspective more? And of course, you know, the rest of the office chimed in and we're like, no, you know, it's still a reader-led issue.
All right, thank you all for coming in. Next, Arizona Week explores the growing partnerships between the state's universities and private healthcare companies.